Hi, this is Carl, and what I want to talk about in this video is my general dislike for textbooks, particularly ones which tend to be used in secondary education as part of teaching GCSE courses. Now, I'm not referring here specifically to audiobooks, i.e. those which come with accompanying audio material such as CDs and in times gone by cassette tapes, but simply to books which are broken down into separate chapters and where each of those chapters is dedicated to a particular topic, whether it be greetings, introducing oneself, the history and culture of Spain, or getting around on public transport and so forth. Perhaps one of the reasons as to why I've developed this stereotype which I've formed for myself, whereby I've said to myself audiobooks are no good, they don't really benefit students or GCSE pupils, any type of individual learner. Many people may think that my assertion, my belief is not entirely true, that there are in fact many advantages to using this type of materials, but what I'm going to try to do as briefly as possible in this video is to justify that particular opinion of mine. Now, a thought which runs through my head when I open a GCSE textbook is I find that on the first few pages, and indeed throughout the whole of the book, that there are so many different reading passages, many texts broken down into numerous paragraphs. In the past, I've worked for a handful of third-party tutors, and they've found for me ab initio learners, beginners in a particular modern foreign language, and the third-party tutor has suggested to me before I've gone to meet the student or students for the very first time that I acquire some form of textbook from which to work, even if it's a GCSE style textbook and the learners in question are not working towards that particular examination qualification. And very recently this is something which has happened over the last 12 months or so, that I've met a number of learners who had decided that they were going to be studying together the Spanish language, and a third-party tutor recommended that I go onto eBay and that I look at 3 or 4 textbooks which she had on her list, and that if I were to get one of these textbooks then she would reimburse me. So I did this, and the one which I chose, and it will probably have been the same situation for each of them, was, as I say, I opened the first few pages, and even from the introductory unit there were lots of different texts, and then there were comprehension questions in Spanish, very few instructions actually in English. And I remember thinking at the time, why should I be using this material when it's nearly all in Spanish? Much of the vocabulary will be unfamiliar to the students. There will also be lots of grammatical structures, lots of syntax with which the learners will not yet be familiar, which they'll not yet know. And obviously you can't be expecting, let's say for example, as a homework task, telling the learners to read the passage, look up the vocabulary which they don't know, which will arguably be in a majority, and answer the comprehension questions which are also in Spanish. This is why I've always preferred, I think, to use my own learning resources, put together my own materials, because then I'll know how to use them, how to tweak them, and how to adapt them in accordance with the level of language which any particular learner has at any moment in time. So, as I say, much of the vocabulary is unfamiliar to the students, as is much of the syntax, the sentence structures, how different words change. Also that ties in with how you would use a bilingual dictionary. Which words would you expect to find as main entries in that dictionary, and which ones would you not be able to find, and why? Instead, I prefer to slowly introduce basic aspects of a modern foreign language to the learners, integrate, for example, general levels of conversation, saying basic phrases, and then implementing into the development of oral skills, even at a basic level, a gradual knowledge of the grammar, and then building up the vocabulary slowly but surely, providing plenty of opportunities for the learners to revise the lexis, the words, and only then can we get to a stage whereby the learners have an understanding of X, Y, or Z, rather than putting them into an immediate position whereby they're too overwhelmed with vocabulary which they've never even seen before in their lives, and with grammatical structures which from the outset would seem very complicated because they would need time to adapt to them. So the main concern with me is that there is too much emphasis, too much focus on the development of reading skills, on being potentially in a position whereby you have to look up words and try to learn those words, absorb the vocabulary, a rather tedious exercise in itself. And then, in addition to that, with many of this kind of textbooks, you have a grammar section every so often, usually which is colour-coded in a different section of the book, maybe after every chapter or so, but it's taken far too much in isolation from the actual topic-based material. And only if you as a teacher can integrate the grammar and the topic-based learning vocabulary and use that as a foundation on to which you place the development of oral linguistic proficiency, then that is a more reliable way forward, and arguably students or any type of learners will progress much more quickly if you use that method.